Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Yeksik. This is a man who's on the run because of the horrible crimes he committed in July of last year. He took the lives of 3 people who were a part of his own family. One of the family members was able to escape this horrific nightmare and was able to make it safely to the neighbor's house where they could call the authorities for help. Since these horrific crimes, he has gone missing and no one is sure of his whereabouts. Right now it is speculated that he likely escaped from Poland where the crimes took place, but his exact whereabouts remain quite the mystery. In our number 9 spot today we have Robert Picton. This horrible person is one of the worst Canadians to have ever lived and is one of our country's worst serial killers ever. Picton dropped out of school and began working at his family's pig farm, and this is where most of his absolutely horrific crimes took place. He was first arrested in 2002 and was convicted in 2007 of taking the lives of 6 people, but throughout an extremely lengthy investigation, evidence of many more killings came to light. During his time in jail, an undercover police officer posed as his cellmate, and Picton confessed to 49 crimes to him. Apparently, he was saying to the undercover officer that he wanted to take one more life to make it an even 50 and that he only got caught because he was sloppy. The entire trial was a bit of a mess, but it did lead to a life sentence without the possibility of parole for 25 years, which was the longest possible sentence under Canadian law at the time. This unfortunately does mean that he will be eligible for parole within the next decade, which is a terrifying thought, but being eligible doesn't mean he's going to get it, so there's always hope. In our number 8 spot today we have Delphine Lalorie. Delphine was a New Orleans socialite who was an evil person behind closed doors. It is said that in public Delphine was polite and appeared as if she cared for those who were enslaved in her home, which is truly the most bizarre sentence I've ever said, but I guess back then that was considered being a good person. I digress. Delphine's social standing remained until on April 10th, 1834, authorities responded to a fire at her Royal Street mansion. When they arrived and went inside, no one was prepared for the horrors that they were about to see, as they discovered bound slaves in her attic who had clear signs of violent behavior over a long period of time. Following this, her house was swarmed by an outraged group of New Orleans citizens, but somehow Delphine was able to escape with her family to France. While the angry group destroyed her entire home, Delphine never faced any punishments for her crimes, which is probably the most frustrating ending to this entire story. In our number 7 spot today we have Alexander Solonic. Alexander was known as Alexander the Great, but I'm not sure if great is the word I would use to describe him. He was a Russian gangster who was a pretty notorious hitman for the Russian criminal world. He started out as a member of the Soviet army, but he was quickly kicked out for his violence towards suspects. He actually ended up in prison for some of the things he did. After 2 years he ended up escaping, and this is when his contract killing career started. After a few years of living this life, he was apprehended by the police. Once at the station, he revealed a small automatic weapon that they had failed to find on him, and he opened fire on the officers. He ran outside where he hit 2 more officers, but he ended up cornered and hit by a shot himself. After being jailed for a second time, he ended up escaping from prison again, and this time he disappeared. He was later found in Greece with a fake passport, and it was here where he started his own little gang of around 50 men, which were of course all involved in shady activities. In 1997, however, his body was found just outside of Athens, and this time the tables had turned and he was someone else's victim. Authorities found evidence that he had been hired to carry out a hit in Italy before his death, and these two things just may be correlated. In our number 6 spot today we have Elizabeth Wetlaufer. Elizabeth is a former registered nurse and serial killer who is responsible for taking the lives of 8 and attempting to take the lives of another 6 senior citizens who were under her care. With a total of 14 victims that either passed away or were harmed by her actions, she is now one of the worst serial killers Canada has ever seen. And not to mention how she was doing these things to vulnerable people that she was supposed to have devoted her life to taking care of. Her first victim who passed away was James Silcox, who was 84 in 2007 and was a World War II veteran. She committed her crimes by injecting insulin into her patients. In September of 2016, Liz ended up entering herself into a drug rehabilitation program at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, which is located here in Toronto. It It was here that she ended up confessing to her horrific crimes. Of course, the staff at the hospital notified the proper authorities and she was subsequently arrested, and she gave police a 2-hour-long confession. She admitted to knowing that what she did was wrong, but she said she just had urges she couldn't control. She stated that, quote, God or the devil or whatever wanted me to do it. In the end, she was sentenced to life in prison, but because of the way that the Canadian system works, at some point she will be eligible for parole. In our number 5 spot today, we have Pedro Lopez. Pedro is a man who lived a life committing some of the most horrific crimes I've ever even heard of throughout South America in the 1970s. By the time the 1980s rolled around, he made a mistake during one of his awful crimes, and this led to his arrest. Once in police custody, he began to basically explain his entire life story, and he confessed to an astronomical amount of crimes. People were a little skeptical of just how many crimes he said he committed, but Pedro was able to lead them to a mass grave where they recovered a total of 53 people's remains. Pedro, of course, went to jail, but get this, he was somehow released in 1994. I'm like, great. Just before I was born. Nice. He wasn't sent home straight away and instead was sent to some sort of mental institution for 3 years, but he was also released from there. Okay, so aside from the crimes he committed, are you ready for the worst part? In 2002, he was suspected of being the perpetrator of a new crime, but no one has been able to find him since 1998. Yeah, he disappeared. Awesome. In our number 4 spot today, we have Ilse Cook. Ilse is a war criminal who oversaw concentration camps that were run by her husband, Carl Otto Cook. She is well known due to her sadistic and brutal treatment of prisoners, and she became one of the first well-known people that committed these types of crimes to be tried by the US military. It is said that those being held at the camps with distinctive tattoos, Ilse would take a piece of their skin as souvenirs. When being charged with her crimes, they included things like private enrichment, embezzlement, as well as taking the lives of some prisoners to prevent them from testifying. In the original trial, she was acquitted for lack of evidence, although her husband was sentenced to death by an SS court in Munich. After a few more trials, however, she ended up being sentenced to life in prison, and despite multiple appeal attempts, she was never released. In our number 3 spot today, we have Joseph Stalin. Stalin was a Georgian revolutionary and Soviet political leader who governed the Soviet Union from 1922 until his death in 1953. Despite the fact that he started his time governing the country as part of a collective leadership, by the 1930s he had consolidated all of the power and went on to begin acting as the Soviet Union's dictator. During his reign, Stalin was responsible for the deaths of over 60 million people, 20 million of them being his own. Apparently the math works out to be about 40,000 people per week, which is truly unbelievable. It is worth noting, especially since this list is about people who were born evil, that there were good things that he did at some point or another. I mean, Stalin's forces did start out as an Axis power in World War II, and he did help us out a great deal and helped to bring down you-know-who, but in the end, that good can't eliminate the harm that he did. Also, before he was in power, it is said that as a young man, he was a robber and an assassin. For almost 30 years, he reigned the Soviet Union with terror and violence. I mean, his decisions led to a famine that killed millions of people alone. Also, the lives he took weren't just of enemies. I mean, how could one person have 60 million enemies? He would take the lives of the families of people he liked. He just took too many lives, was too paranoid, and while he was powerful and smart, he was also an absolute monster. This is all perfectly summed up when he said, quote, "One death is a tragedy, a million deaths is simply a statistic." In our number 2 spot today, we have Pol Pot. Pol Pot was the leader of the Cambodian revolutionary group called the Khmer Rouge, and this group, with him at the forefront, went on to try and destroy Cambodian civilization. This wasn't necessarily how the group started out, but once Pol and others who shared his ideas came to lead it, things quickly became dark. He is likely one of the only people who ordered a mass genocide in his own country. The reasoning behind all of this is because he believed that destroying the civilization was the best way to start a new regime and bring in a new age. He ended up serving as the prime minister from 1976 until 1979, during which his policies led to the deaths of around 2 million people, which is horrifying. That was about 25% of the entire population. He even liked to keep the skulls of those he had killed. I'm just gonna say, it seems as though politics was was the mask for someone who just really wanted to kill. There are so many horrific details surrounding him and the things he did, some of which I can't even repeat here on YouTube, and that is exactly how he landed a spot here on today's list. He truly did some horrendous things and in the end went on to live the rest of his life and died of natural causes before he could answer for any of his crimes. In our number 1 spot today we have Heinrich Himmler. Alright, this is one real piece of work who was very active on what we'll call the bad team during World War II, and he is actually one of the people who really helped to create and build the Holocaust. He was the head of the SS and he controlled concentration camps, and you wanna know what he was best known for? His organizational skills and for picking the best subordinates. Yeah, they really liked him because he was able to pick the other best, worst people ever to work with him. That's absolutely insane. They say opposites attract, but in this case it was just terrible people joining other terrible people. He believed that certain groups of people, like Jewish people, were unworthy of living, and he himself ordered the deaths of 6 million. It is completely unimaginable just how evil this person really was. This hasn't exactly been verified, but it's something that's been said for years, and that is that he had furniture made from the skins and bones of these people. In the end, because he was nothing but a coward, when things for him and his party started to go south, he tried to have open peace talks with the Western allies behind the back of you-know-who. Of course, he found out and had Himmler dismissed from all of his posts and ordered his arrest. This led Himmler to trying to go into hiding, but he was detained and then arrested by British forces once his identity became known. To make this story even worse, while in custody he took his own life because of course he didn't want to answer for his terrible actions.
Starting us off at number 10 is The Thief. So this was shared by someone whose mum worked as a manager at Walmart. One day she came home proper surprised, and obviously the kid asked what happened that day. That day at work, a woman was caught trying to steal one of the prepaid phones on display. Now when the security guard caught her, she pulled out the knife she'd been using to open up the phone's packaging to cut him open. But before doing that, she cut herself first and then screamed about how she had AIDS and now how the guard had AIDS as well, all because he was trying to stop her from taking the phone. The story is honestly all over the place. I don't even know what to say to you guys. I swear the first rule they teach you in retail is never chase or try and apprehend anyone that's trying to steal, but they also never ended that sentence with because the thief may give you AIDS, but maybe they should start doing that. I've never chased someone that stole something from the store I worked at. Like, off you go.
In our number 9 spot today we have the River City Ripper. One of the most terrifying things that exists are serial killers who are still on the loose, especially when you find out that they've been recently active. This serial killer is wanted in connection to 4 different incidents that occurred in Little Rock, Arkansas, 3 of which were fatal. These horrific crimes took place between August of 2020 and April of 2021, and despite one of the victims thankfully surviving the attack and being able to provide a description of the assailant, there is still very little to go on in terms of being able to identify this horrible human. The FBI was contacted shortly after the survivor was able to give a testimony to authorities, and their behavioral analysis team created a profile of this unidentified killer. These crimes are terrible any way you spin them, but one of the most terrifying parts is that they were all just completely random acts of violence that occurred just unprovoked. The case has gained quite a bit of attention, but still, the monster remains at large. In our number 8 spot today we have Ruja Ignatova. This woman is a convicted fraudster who has been on the run since 2017 after she disappeared when she was found out to be the founder of a Ponzi scheme. The scam, known as Onecoin, which was a scam that was surrounding cryptocurrency, has been referred to as one of the biggest scams in history. US prosecutors have claimed that the scheme was so huge it brought in approximately $4 billion worldwide. Ruja had impeccable timing as she disappeared right at the time that there was a secret US warrant being filed for her arrest. Despite being on the run since 2017, in 2019 she was charged in absentia by US authorities for wire fraud, securities fraud, as well as money laundering. This lady is living the real life Ozark. It's absolutely insane. This case truly is something you'd expect to see on TV, but she's just living it. Despite the years it's been, international authorities are still doing their best to find out where she has been hiding, and this includes raids that have happened just this year. In our number 7 spot today we have the vending machine killer. Okay, so for this one we have to know that apparently there are a lot of vending machines in Japan. Like, it's said that there's one for every 23 people. It's a lot of vending machines. So in 1985 in Hiroshima, there were 12 people who passed away and 35 people who were seriously injured from being poisoned with a chemical herbicide. When the string of poisonings were investigated, authorities realized that they had one thing in common, and that was the fact that they had all had the same drink shortly before falling ill. So around the time of this whole thing, there was a company that had launched a marketing campaign where they gave a free drink with every purchase made from a vending machine. When people didn't want their free drink, they would leave it on top of the vending machine for the next person who came along, which is super nice and thoughtful and kind, and of course that means that some horrible person out there had to ruin it for everyone. So, as it turns out, someone was taking these drinks, lacing them with poison, and then leaving them on top of the machines for some random stranger to come around, drink it, and then be sick or unfortunately pass away. It is almost impossible for authorities to be able to track down whoever was doing this, because you have to narrow down where the person picked up the drink, and in 1985 there weren't as many CCTV cameras as there are now. So unfortunately, whoever was responsible for a mass poisoning of strangers is still out there somewhere. In our number 6 spot today we have Jan Marsalek. Jan is said to be a white-collar criminal who fled and went into hiding in June 2020 after the Wirecard Scandal, as he was the COO of the company. If you're unfamiliar, Wirecard was a German payment processing firm that had years and years of allegations of malpractice against them. The entire thing really came to a peak in 2019 when the Financial Times published some of the investigations into the complaints, as well as internal documents. In the end, in 2020, Wirecard filed for insolvency after it was realized that 1.9 billion euros were missing. If anyone finds that missing $1.9 billion, my DMs are wide open. It is believed that Jan is one of the main culprits in the entire scandal, and to be fair, fleeing the country doesn't really make you look very innocent. It is believed that he may be located in Russia now, but since August of 2020, Interpol has issued a red notice for him, which requests that worldwide law enforcement be on the lookout for him in order to arrest him, where he can then be extradited. In our number 5 spot today we have Bible John. This is the name used in reference to an unidentified serial killer who was responsible for Scotland's largest manhunt. All 3 of his victims were young brunette women between the ages of 25 to 32, and they had all met him at the Barrel and Ballroom, which was a dance and music venue in Glasgow. Despite this important information, he has never been able to be identified. This was actually the first time in Scotland in which the Crown Office authorized the publication of a composite drawing of the man who was suspected of the crimes. The reason he is called Bible John is said to be because he apparently repeatedly quoted the Bible, which is, I don't know, just really creepy. Most of the key information in the investigation came from one of the victim's sisters, Jean Langford, who had been in the same taxi as her sister and the suspected killer on the night he took her life. She was able to give a description of the man and was able to give information that helped authorities create a profile of him. Despite her incredibly helpful information, he was never able to be caught, and Jean passed away in 2010. While Bible John might have also passed away by now, I still hope that one day authorities can figure out who he was. In our number 4 spot today we have Monica Witt. Monica is a former United States Air Force technical sergeant as well as a defense contractor who has been on the run since 2018. Despite her high-ranking position and high security clearance, she is on the run because she defected to Iran in 2013. It is said that from 2013 up until she was found out that she was using her position in order to spy on the United States and relay that information back to the group she was working for. She used different fake Facebook accounts, and it is said that the information she gave included the classified true name and counterintelligence activities of a US intelligence operative. This is of course a problem regardless of how important this operation was, but it is said that this information she shared had the potential to cause serious damage to the United States national security. It is an absolutely wild story, and Monica is still out there on the run, hiding from the consequences of her betrayal and espionage. In our number 3 spot today we have John Pyle. This horrible human isn't an undercover spy or insane fraudster. He is just a monster who committed certain crimes that are unfortunately a little more common than any of us would like to know. Because of the nature of his crimes, I can't talk about them here in this video, but let's just say that he is definitely one of the worst kinds of criminals out there. On June 24th, 2016, authorities searched his home after after receiving 3 tips relating to his crimes. The amount of and the severity of the incriminating evidence they found during this search ended up landing him charged with 30 different second-degree felonies, which could bring a sentence of 450 years in prison. He was arrested this same day and posted a bail bond of $90,000. Why he was able to get bail, I'll never know. And he also had to surrender his passport. Flash forward 16 months to October 23rd, 2017, and of course, this guy doesn't show up for his hearing, and thus we have a fugitive on the run. Even though he gave up his passport, it is said that he was still somehow able to board a Carnival cruise ship that was bound for Cozumel, Mexico. He got off the ship when it arrived and never reboarded. Despite efforts from international authorities as well as bounty hunters, he has still yet to be located. The last time he was seen was in February of 2018 in Nuevo Leon. In our number 2 spot today, we have Alejandro Castillo. Alejandro is an American man who was added to the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list in October of 2017. He was added to the list after disappearing after taking the life of a woman named Sandy Lai Lee. Sandy was a co-worker of his, and it is said that the two might have briefly dated. Basically, apparently, she had lent him some money that he had never repaid. On August 9th, 2016, Alejandro texted Sandy saying that he would like to repay her, and they agreed to meet at a Quick Trip. Alejandro was driven to this meeting by Amaya Feaster, who is said to be his new girlfriend. It is believed that once at the meeting, instead of repaying her, Alejandro forced Sandy to take out all of the money from her bank account, which is said to have been about $1,000. After this, the pair drove Sandy to a wooded area where it is said that he then took her life. After this, the pair fled the scene of the crime and drove from North Carolina to Phoenix, Arizona. They then ended up fleeing into Mexico from there. While Amaya turned herself into authorities on October 20th, 2016, Alejandro remains at large and on the run. Despite the years it's been, I hope that one day he is found so he can be brought to justice for this horrible, senseless crime. In our number 1 spot today, we have Badrashkumar Patel. This is a man who, in 2015, was in the United States in Hanover, Maryland, with his wife Palak. It is said that the pair were traveling to visit relatives and that they had both taken a job at a local Dunkin' Donuts that was owned by one of their family members. It was at this location that on April 12th, 2015, it is said that he took the life of his wife. Surveillance footage shows the two of them walking together in the kitchen around 9:30 p.m. that day before they disappear out of view behind some racks that were in the kitchen. Shortly after this, he reappears alone, turns the oven off, and leaves. Authorities believe that this all may have been over an argument where one of the couple wanted to return to India while the other wanted to stay in the United States. After customers of the store began getting worried when no one came to take their order, they thankfully decided to approach a nearby police officer. The officer went to investigate, and that is when he sadly found her body. The last sighting of him was on April 13th at around 10 a.m. at Newark Penn Station in New Jersey. He had taken a hotel shuttle there and has never been seen since. There is currently a $100,000 reward for information that leads to his whereabouts. It truly is an unimaginable horror, and I hope that this monster is one day brought to justice. Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot, we have Nero. To start off this list, we are going to be taking it back all the way to the age of the Roman Empire. When we think back to these times, they weren't necessarily the most kind, peaceful of times, but there certainly are some characters that stand out as being particularly brutal, and one of those is Nero. Throughout his reign, he wreaked havoc on the Roman Empire, he burned cities, he killed thousands of people, including every member of his own family, and I mean, we know the inventive execution methods of the past, so you can probably guess at just how brutal these all were. Most Roman sources give us an almost completely negative review of him in reference to both his personality and his reign as a leader. He was called compulsive and corrupt, and it is believed that he is actually to blame for the great fire that burned Rome, but instead he used the Christians as a scapegoat so that they would receive punishments rather than him. Real stand-up guy. In the end, after being declared a public enemy by the Roman Senate and realizing that the rebellion would be lost, he ended up taking his own life at the age of 30.
Coming in at number 9 is asphyxiation. I honestly have no idea what is happening in this picture. Now, the mum of this child is pushing the car while her daughter is sitting in the child's seat part of the trolley, which is normal, that's all good, except for the fact the kid has a plastic bag over her head. Like, I'm sorry? The mum put that over her head, or does she do it herself? If it's the former, someone call CPS, and if it's the latter, why is the mum not doing anything? Again, call CPS. When I was young, I remember seeing so many movies where someone would be getting tortured or interrogated, and asphyxiation with a plastic bag is how they'd kill the person. So I feel like if I saw this in real life at a Walmart, I'd actually intervene and be like, what is going on? What is you doing? That is not okay. At At number 8 we have piss. It's a Walmart video, you guys. I'm gonna make the titles as ratchet as the store itself. Deal with it. Sue me. So this story came from a former employee who shared that one day a woman came in, bought a bottle of perfume, and then went to the bathroom. And give me a minute, because I don't even want to imagine the breeding cesspool of filth that would be a Walmart bathroom, so you already know she's going to be doing some whack in there. Turns out she poured the perfume into her own bottle that she brought and then filled the actual perfume bottle by pissing in it. And that's not even the worst part. She then had the nerve and audacity to try and return this perfume bottle full of her own piss. The employee in question happened to be working cash that day and was like, okay, this is clearly a bottle of piss, and then called their manager, and the manager had clearly had enough and was just like, just process the return, just do it, don't ask questions. The bottle was evidently still warm from how fresh the urine was. Like, what kind of psycho does that? I would not, if I was working cash, you bet your ass I'm not processing your piss as a return. I'm not refunding you for that. Or I hope she at least dried the bottle. I don't want to be touching your piss. Filling on number 7 slot is the big baby. So this picture was shared on People of Walmart back in 2009, and it appears to be an old man dressed as a big baby. He's equipped with a baby bag, a diaper, pacifier, outfit, and all. And it has no context whatsoever, so I don't know if he was just dressed like that for fun or if he perhaps has Peter Pan syndrome. Now PPS is when someone either does not want to grow up or they're unable to do so the person ends up being an adult with the mind of a child. So if it's the latter, I don't want to say anything because it's not that person's fault they're suffering, but if he just came there dressed like that to creep people out, it 100% worked. I would walk in the complete opposite direction of this dude and not even make eye contact, to be honest. Now at number 6 is the goat. This one made me laugh so hard because I genuinely had no idea what I was looking at before I opened up the picture. I was like, is that E.T.? Is that some kind of alien? Like, what is that creature? Someone just tell me. Anyway, when I opened it up, I realized this woman was carrying a goat in a baby carrier strapped to her back. And what sent me about this one was how the goat's legs are like this around the woman's back, and then she's wearing a jumper, and I'm like, what is going on here? Like, did the woman never have a kid and so it was just compensating by carrying around this goat? Where's the goat's real mom, and is she in distress because her baby isn't with her? If I saw this, I would legit be on my way straight out of the store like, nah, that's not happening. That's not me. We're not doing that. It was a cute goat though, I'm not gonna lie. Coming in at number 5 is the Walmart killer. This was shared by Reddit user Sonic Underground, who said on their first day working at Walmart, a customer was in the fan aisle, so the user decided to go help him out. You know, when you're a first day employee, all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, not knowing retail will suck your soul out. Either way, the man was holding 2 box fans, not knowing which one to buy, so he proceeds to ask the user. The user then asks him what size he's looking for what room, and so forth, and at the end makes a very sound recommendation. The customer then shouts sucker at the user, slaps the recommended fan out of their hand, and then runs to the cashier with the other one. I feel like clearly no one cares about this employee's opinion. Dumbfounded, the user was like, what the hell just happened to me? And their co-workers joined the user in the aisle laughing, saying that that customer was a regular and he was insane, and also convinced Walmart was trying to kill him. So to try and beat this company's attempts, he would ask the staff what he should buy and then go against their recommendation because it was clearly booby-trapped. That's all I'm gonna say. At number 4 is the girl. Now again, I'm gonna preface this with the fact I don't kink shame anyone. However, I would have been very troubled by the sight of this, I'm not gonna lie. Shared by Redditor BB Rodriguez, who is an overnight stalker at a Florida Walmart, she shared that once a really pretty girl came in wearing this leather bondage lingerie looking outfit. And I mean, that's fine, BDSM is so common. However, she was on a dog leash on all fours being walked by 3 older Caucasian men who looked to be meth heads. She was barking all over the store, and employees asked her several times if she needed help, but all she did was bark back at them. The men then paraded her around the store for an hour before buying her a chew toy and leaving. Mind you, it was 3 bloody AM on a Tuesday. Like, was this girl in her right mind? But I can't even go into this, we're a PG channel. I get roleplay and staying in character, but like, do you need help? Blink twice for yes. Or even just bark once for yes. Filling at number 3 slot is the lack of restraint. This one was shared by someone that worked as an overnight stock employee at Walmart. She shared that one night a guy came in drunk out of his mind, which I feel like is no surprise at Walmart. She was bent down filling a bottom shelf with green beans, and when she looked up, this guy was this close to her with his out. He then asked her if she would perform fellatio on him for $50. She didn't even dignify him with a response, she just ran to her manager, and when the manager finally tracked him down in the store, he was in nothing but his underwear, rubbing and pleasuring himself on a pair of women's underwear. Whose underwear was it? No clue. Either way, he was arrested shortly after. Why do people get harassed when they're at work? Like, that pisses me off to no extent. You cannot harass man or woman at work. I will fight you, legitimately. I'm not even worried about it. Now, at number 2 is El Paso. Back in August of last year, a mass shooting took place at a Walmart in El Paso, which killed 20 people and badly injured more than 24 others. The victims ranged from being 35 to 82 years old, and 9 of them were in critical condition at the hospital after the fact. The police managed to arrest a 21-year-old perpetrator who had apparently written a manifesto confessing the crime was racially motivated. Calls started coming to the police at 10 AM the day of, saying that's when the whole incident started. As shocking and sad as that is anyone really surprised? I feel like last year there was so many mass shootings in the US, I literally can't even count them on 2 hands, let alone every limb on my body. You heard it first. Actually, you didn't hear it first because it's everywhere. Listen. And finally, at number 1 is The Treasure. So this one is really messed up and was shared by Reddit user Mike Michaels, who was a former employee. Mike shared that once a very dirty old homeless man came into the store and asked him to ring him up the cashier. While there, the man kept one hand inside his jacket and kept looking over his shoulder and just acting super shady and sus. Now, Mike didn't think much of it, but he was wary nonetheless and was just trying to scan the items as quickly as possible so the guy would leave. Then all of a sudden the guy looks him straight in the eye and asks, "Do you want to see my treasure?" with the creepiest smile on his face. Now, Mike's mind was racing. Did he have a gun in his jacket? Was it a bomb? An actual piece of treasure? The possibilities were endless and the risk was very high. Before even answering, the guy then slowly opened his jacket to reveal a newborn puppy, still slimy, barely even moving, still covered in blood with its umbilical cord very much attached. Like, what the f***? Mind my language, but what the f***? Like, did he find a dog that had given birth and just take a puppy? Like, what the f*** is this? I'm sorry. Beat me out as much as you need to. That's just not on. I hate it, and the puppy probably didn't survive because it needs its mum, right? Thank you, stupid homeless man.